The sky cracked open like glass. Bright green fire fell from the heavens above planet Tressa, a peaceful world known for its floating gardens and glowing lakes. No one had seen a war in centuries. The Tressari were artists, dancers, and dreamers. But tonight, the air burned with screams and smoke. Yari clutched her younger brother as the ground shook. Alien warships, metal monsters with red lights rained destruction across the floating cities. These were not raiders or pirates. This was full invasion. But from where and why? She ran. Yari had trained with blades as was tradition in her. Noble family, but this was beyond her. Blasters, drones, firestorms from orbit. It didn't matter that she was fast or clever. The machines did not care. Suddenly, a bright flash exploded near the city edge. She was thrown backward, landing hard, near the ruins of a tower. When she woke, everything was silent. Only the low humming of enemy machines echoed nearby. Her brother was gone. Her people were gone. The invaders were moving inward, searching. She hid for hours, maybe days. Until she saw him. A single figure walked straight through the ruined battlefield. Not hiding, he was tall, strong, and clearly not Tressari. His armor was scratched and burned. He carried no flag, just a massive rifle and a blade strapped to his back. A human. She had only seen them in data logs. Deathworlders. Creatures from violent worlds, born under crushing gravity and fierce storms. Dangerous. Wild, unpredictable. And yet, this one was laughing. He crouched beside a wrecked enemy drone, tore off a panel with his bare hands, and used wires to recharge his weapon. Then he looked around, as if bored. She stared from her hiding spot. What kind of being just walks through a battlefield? The human glanced directly at her hiding spot. She froze. Then he said, without fear, "You planning to shoot me or join me?" Yari stepped out slowly. Her silver eyes narrowed. "You're not part of the enemy?" He tilted his head. "No, I kill." "The enemy." Her voice trembled. "Who are you?" He grinned. "Name's Jake, Terran Marine." "You?" "Yari, Tressari noble." "Fancy," he said, nodding. "Let's see if you fight as well as you dress." Before she could answer, a screeching noise filled the sky. A large drone dropped from above. Its cannons locked onto them. Jake didn't flinch. He leaped, mid-air. He grabbed the spinning barrel, slammed his boots against the drone's frame, and used his own momentum to swing onto its top. He pulled out his blade, thick, curved, and sharp, and drove it straight into the machine's brain. The drone exploded behind him. Yari blinked. "You're insane," she said. Jake stood up, covered in soot. "Yeah, but I'm alive." That night, they shared a ruined bunker. Jake roasted something alien over a broken plasma coil. Yari watched in silence, still trying to understand this strange human. "So," Jake said casually between bites, "your planet's not as peaceful as they told me." She gave a tired laugh. "It was. Until 3 days ago." He looked at her for a long moment. "I've seen this before. Planet gets hit fast. No warnings, no demands, just wipe out." Yari's voice dropped. "Why?" Jake's eyes turned serious. "Because someone thinks your world has something valuable. Or dangerous. Maybe both." She held her blade tight. "Then we fight." Jake smiled again, this time slower, darker. "Now you're talking like a Deathworlder," Yari frowned. "I'm not like you," he shrugged. "You survived. You didn't beg. You're still standing." Then he pointed to her sword. "You know how to use that?" She nodded. Double quotes. "Good. We'll need it." The stars above flickered as more enemy ships descended. The war was just beginning. And Jake? He looked ready to enjoy it. The wind howled through the broken ruins of Tressa's capital. Yarin. Jake stood in the center of an old training hall, once a place where Trisari nobles learned dance and blade arts. Now half of it was rubble. The other half was lit by a flickering fire and the sharp glint of steel. Jake tossed her a metal rod. She caught it with one hand. "This isn't my blade," he shrugged. "Your fancy sword's good for style. This is for survival." Yari narrowed her eyes. "I don't need lessons." Jake laughed. "Yes, you do. You're fast. You've got skill. But you fight like someone who's never been punched in the face." He lunged. She barely dodged, but he moved again, quicker, stronger. Brutal. His movements weren't graceful like hers. They were raw and messy. He didn't follow any style. Just instinct and years of war. She fell back, breathless, weapon raised. "See?" he said, stepping back. "You're fighting like you still expect to win clean. There's no clean in war." She got up slowly. "Then show me." Jake's expression shifted. No more jokes. Just quiet understanding. And he did. He taught her how to strike low when the enemy looked high. How to twist a joint, how to break a grip, how to keep breathing even after pain. They fought from morning until the second moon rose. Her elegant moves became sharper, harder, faster. At one point, Jake grabbed her arm and twisted. She dropped her rod. Instead of stopping, he kicked her feet out from under her and pinned her to the stone floor. "Never drop your weapon," he said calmly, his face inches from hers. She glared. "You're enjoying this?" he smiled. "A little." Yari kneed him hard and rolled free. She picked up her rod again. "Good. So am I." They circled each other, both sweating, both breathing hard, both smiling now. Then Jake said, "You're learning faster than most Marines I've trained." Yari raised an eyebrow. "I thought humans didn't train aliens." He looked at her seriously. "We don't, but I don't see you as an alien anymore." Something passed between them. A spark. But before anything else could be said, a sound broke through the night, a whirring mechanical hum. Jake raised his rifle. Scouts. He moved fast, dragging Yari behind cover. 3 spider-like drones crept across the rubble outside the hall. Red eyes scanned the shadows. Jake whispered, "I'll take the 2 on the left. You handle the 3rd. Yari's heart pounded. She wasn't ready, but Jake looked at her and said, "You are." Then he ran. In seconds, Jake leapt onto the first drone and stabbed its eye. The second fired at him. He ducked, rolled, and blew it apart with a short blast from his rifle. Yari moved toward the 3rd drone. It turned and aimed at her. She didn't think. She dropped, slid beneath it, and slammed the metal rod into its underbody, just like Jake had shown her. Sparks flew. The drone screamed, then collapsed. When she stood, Jake was already walking back. He nodded. "Told you." Yari smiled for the first time since the war began. "Maybe I am a Deathworlder." He gave a mock bow. "Welcome to the club." Later that night, they sat near a small fire. Jake was cleaning his weapon. Yari was sharpening her blade, her real one this time. She asked, "Why are you here, Jake?" "You said no one sent you." Jake stared at the flames. "I got tired of waiting. The galaxy doesn't care about people like you. Peaceful, kind, smart. So when I saw the invasion alerts, I jumped a stolen shuttle and came to help." Yari blinked. "Alone?" "Yeah, I'm not part of any army anymore. But I'm still a soldier." She looked at him quietly. "You're insane," Jake smirked. "That's why I survive." Yari leaned back, staring at the stars above. The smoke from burning cities rose into the night sky. But for the first time, she felt hope. They weren't alone. Tomorrow they would strike back. Together. The forest near the western ridge burned slowly. Ash drifted through the air like black snow as Jake and Yari moved carefully through the twisted trees. The enemy had pushed forward since last night, leaving nothing but wreckage behind. Most of the Trazari were gone. Scattered, hiding, or worse. But Jake was searching for something else. He stopped near a broken scout drone and crouched. "This one's different," he muttered. Yari tilted her head. "It looks the same." Jake tapped the metal casing. "New design. No blast marks. Means it wasn't destroyed in combat." He opened a panel. Inside was something strange, wires filled with a glowing blue fluid, and a metal sphere pulsing slowly with light. Not tech he recognized. Jake frowned. "This isn't just a drone. It's a transmitter." Yari knelt beside him. "What does it send?" Jake looked up. "Location. Targets. It tracks survivors." She went cold. "All the refugees hiding in the mountains." She whispered, "They're being tracked." Jake's face hardened. "Unless we stop this now." They moved fast, through the burned woods, past fallen towers, closer to the mountains where old tunnels from ancient times ran deep underground. Jake believed that was where the enemy command center might be hidden inside the planet, using old ruins to hide their tech. As they climbed a rocky slope, Yari asked, "How do you know so much about enemy tech?" Jake didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, "Because I've fought them before." Her eyes widened. "Where?" Jake stared ahead. "On another death world. One that didn't make it." Yari didn't ask more. By midday, they reached the tunnel entrance. The stone arch was covered in moss and alien vines, untouched for thousands of years, but someone had carved through it recently. Burn marks lined the path. Deep inside, they heard the humming sound again, the same as the drone's signal. Yari tightened her grip on her sword. Jake handed her a small explosive charge. "If we find the transmitter core, this will fry it." She raised an eyebrow. "That small device can destroy their tech?" Jake smirked. "Human engineering." They crept into the darkness. Inside, the tunnels glowed faintly with old runes. It reminded Yari of childhood stories of the first Trazari who fought monsters and sealed them underground. Now those monsters had returned in a different form. Soon, they reached a large cavern. In the center stood a strange structure, part machine, part crystal tower. Hundreds of wires ran from it into the ground. Small drones floated around it, scanning, repairing. Jake crouched. "There it is. Their main relay." Yari stared. "It's feeding power into the mountain." "No," Jake corrected. "It's feeding from the mountain." She looked closer. The crystal at the top. It pulsed in time with the heartbeat of the planet. They weren't just invading. They were draining her world's energy. Yari's voice was cold now. "They're not just after territory. They're killing Tressa itself." Jake nodded grimly. "And this is the weak point." They moved quickly and silently. Jake snuck behind. The nearest drone pulled a short blade from his belt and shoved it into the drone's core. It dropped with a buzz. Yari dashed forward, slashing through another. Then Jake ran for the tower. He climbed halfway up and slapped the explosive into place. "Time to go." He shouted. Suddenly sirens. The cavern lit up in red. Heavy doors opened, and 4 massive armored enemy soldiers stomped in. They were twice the size of Jake, covered in black armor with red lights glowing from their eyes. One of them aimed a blaster. Jake shoved Yari down and fired his rifle. The shot bounced off the armor. Yari rolled up and sliced toward the second. Soldier's knee joined her. Blade sparked, but didn't cut deep. "These things are tougher than tanks." Jake shouted. Yari yelled, "Then we don't fight, we run." They sprinted toward the tunnel entrance. The soldiers followed. Jake grabbed a spare grenade, pulled the pin, and threw it behind him. The explosion slowed the soldiers for a few seconds, just enough. They reached the sunlight. Jake pressed a button on his wrist device. Boom. The entire mountain shook. A fireball erupted from the cave behind them. Rocks crumbled. The entrance collapsed, burying the relay and hopefully the soldiers too. They fell to the ground, panting. Yari looked at him. That's their weakness? Jake smiled. No, their weakness is they think we're scared. Yari laughed breathlessly. Well, they're wrong. He sat up. Now that we've broken their signal, the refugees have a chance to hide. Maybe fight back. She looked at the smoldering ruins of the mountain. What now? Jake stood and extended a hand. Now we find the command ship and take the war to them. Asterisk, for the first time in days, the sky over Tressa looked clear. But it was a lie. High above the planet floated the true enemy base, a massive sky fortress shaped like a black thorn, hovering silently among the clouds. From this station, the enemy controlled their invasion forces, their drones, their machines of war. No one on the ground could reach it, except Jake had a plan. Yari stood beside him at the edge of a cliff, looking up. The fortress shimmered faintly against the sun. Like a ghost. That thing's bigger than a mountain, she whispered. Jake smiled. Yeah, and we're going to break into it. She raised an eyebrow. How? Jake reached into his pack and pulled out a small silver device, a beacon with blinking green lights. We steal a ride. Moments later, a distant humming grew louder. One of the enemy's transport ships, an armored dropship with vertical thrusters, came flying low across the forest ridge, heading for a landing zone near a mining outpost. Jake turned to Yari. We take that ship. Then we fly straight up. She blinked. That's crazy. Jake shrugged. Most of my plans are. The dropship landed. Jake and Yari moved fast through the trees, dodging sensor beams and patrol drones. They circled the landing site and climbed onto the rocks above it. 4 enemy soldiers unloaded supplies while a pilot waited in the cockpit. Jake whispered, "On my mark, hit the back line. I'll handle the pilot." Yari nodded. Jake jumped first. He landed behind one soldier and smashed his rifle against the enemy's helmet, then dove toward the ship. Yari dashed in like lightning. Her blade slashed through armor joints and exposed wiring. The soldiers turned to fire, but she moved too fast. One tried to grab her arm. She twisted under it and stabbed upward. Jake reached the cockpit, pulled the pilot out, and knocked him unconscious with one hard punch. "Get in," he shouted. Yari leaped into the back as Jake took the pilot's seat. The ship lifted off before more reinforcements arrived. They shot upward, engines roaring. Wind tore past the open side bay. Yari held onto the frame, watching the world below grow smaller. As they neared the fortress, warning lights blinked across the stolen console. "Are we being targeted?" she asked. Jake muttered, "Not yet. The ID tag's still valid, for now." The fortress loomed closer. It was enormous spires of black steel, glowing red lines and docking platforms the size of cities. Enemy ships flew in and out like insects returning to a hive. Jake guided the dropship toward a lower hangar. Just as they were about to land, the alarm sounded. A red light flashed on the console. "They know," Yari shouted. Jake slammed a button. "Hold on." The dropship twisted and crashed through the side of the hangar, smashing into crates and scaffolding. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. They jumped out just before the engine exploded. Enemy troops poured into the hangar. Jake fired his rifle in short bursts, forcing the soldiers to cover. Yari rolled across the floor, slashing at a control panel. A force field slammed down behind them, cutting off the enemy's path. "Move!" Jake shouted. They ran into the belly of the fortress. Dark hallways. Steam-filled corridors. Strange machines hissed from the walls. Jake checked his scanner. Central command's up 3 levels. "Elevator?" Yari asked. Jake kicked a sealed door. "Too slow." They climbed a narrow service shaft instead, using old pipes and ledges. At one point, Jake slipped, but Yari caught his arm and pulled him up. He grinned. "You've got a strong grip," she smirked. "I've been training." At the top, They reached a wide hallway filled with glowing data panels. Jake pulled a flash drive from his vest. We plug this in, it downloads the enemy's entire battle network. We'll know where every unit is. Yari covered him while he moved to the terminal, but as he connected the drive, the floor vibrated. A large door opened behind them. A towering figure stepped out 8 feet tall, with black armor and a deep mechanical voice. The enemy commander. Jake turned. Uh-oh. Yari raised her blade. The commander didn't attack. He looked at Jake. Terran. Why do you fight for these weaklings? Jake's jaw tightened. Because I used to be one of you. Yari stared in shock. The commander said, You were trained well. Why betray your origin? Jake didn't flinch. Because I became more than what you made me. Then he turned to Yari. Get the data. I'll buy time. Before she could protest, Jake charged. The commander met him head-on, metal clashing. Against flesh and fire. Yari dove for the terminal. She inserted the drive and began the upload. Heart pounding. Jake was thrown against a wall but stood again. She whispered, Just hold on, Jake. The screen flashed green. Download complete. Now all she had to do was escape alive with the truth. The Sky Fortress shook as alarms blared. Yari ran down a narrow corridor, the data drive clutched tight in her hand. Behind her, heavy footsteps echoed. The commander's soldiers were on her trail. But Jake was not with her. She had last seen him battling the towering enemy leader, fists against steel. He was outmatched, outarmed, but Jake hadn't backed down. He'd looked at her and said, Get the data. I'll buy time. She wanted to believe he was still alive. As Yari turned a corner, a metal door slid open ahead. Inside was a small launch bay, dark, abandoned, with only one escape pod left. She rushed in, locked the doors, and activated the launch sequence. Just before the pod launched, she looked back one last time. Jake? She whispered. Then the pod fired, shooting away from the fortress like a comet falling to Trussa below. Yari awoke hours later in a hidden rebel outpost in the southern cliffs. Her pod had been tracked by one of the surviving Trussari resistance groups. They had taken her in, treated her wounds, and gathered around her like she was a savior. But her heart was still up there with Jake. Inside the base, she sat before an old screen. Her hand trembled slightly as she inserted the drive. Lines of alien code streamed across the display. One of the rebel engineers frowned. This isn't just maps or plans. Yari leaned forward. What is it? He tapped the screen. It's their breeding program. Experiments. Notes about human DNA. She froze. What? The engineer pulled up a file. Inside was a name, subject, J47 experimental human hybrid. Yuri stared in silence. J-47. Jake. She whispered, He's one of them? The engineer nodded slowly. He was made in their labs, but something's wrong. He didn't follow his orders, he escaped. More files appeared. Genetic blend, Terran origin, Deathworld grade enhancements, behavioral instability, rejects authority, shows signs of compassion, terminated mission, status, rogue, kill on sight. Yari single quotes S heart twisted. Jake wasn't just a soldier. He was created by the enemy, engineered, but he had broken free. He had chosen to fight them, to protect her. She stood up. I'm going back. The rebel leader stepped forward. That fortress is suicide. You barely escaped. And he might be gone. Yari looked him in the eyes. He's not gone. He's just too stubborn to die. Using the enemy data, the rebels launched a surprise offensive across Trussa. They now had every troop location, every supply route, and most importantly, a weakness in the Sky Fortress's shielding system. While the main force attacked the surface troops, Yari took a stealth flyer toward the fortress once more, alone. This time, she didn't wear noble silks. She wore armor dark, lightweight, reinforced with human alloy. Just like Jake's, she landed at night, through the same broken hangar bay they'd crashed into days earlier. Inside, the fortress was quiet. Damaged. Cracked walls and burn marks showed the signs of Jake's last fight. She followed the trail. Twisted drones. Broken walls. A long scrape where a blade had dragged through metal. She pressed on until she reached the central chamber again. Then she heard breathing. Jake. He was slumped against a wall. Bruised, his armor dented, but alive. One arm was bleeding. And his rifle was broken in half beside him. Yari rushed to him. Jake. He looked up slowly and grinned. Took you long enough. She knelt beside him. You idiot. You could have died, he chuckled weakly. Would have, if not for this thick Terran skull. She hugged him tightly. For a moment, there were no words, just the sound of two survivors still breathing. Then Yari pulled back and looked him in the eyes. I saw the files. Jake's smile faded. I know what you are, she said softly. I know where you came from. He looked away. I didn't ask to be made. No, she said. Jake's voice dropped. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. Not love. Not guilt. Not hope. But when I saw what they were doing to your planet, I couldn't just walk away. Yari squeezed his hand. You may have been made by monsters, Jake, but you became something else. He raised an eyebrow. What's that? She smiled gently. Human. Jake stood once more. With Yari's help, he moved down the dark corridors of the Sky Fortress. His wounds slowed him, but his spirit burned like fire. He had survived worse. He wasn't finished, not yet. Yari walked beside him, sword ready, her eyes cold and focused. The data they had stolen revealed everything: the enemy's tactics, their energy source, and most importantly, the final command chamber that controlled the entire invasion fleet. If they could reach it, they could shut everything down, but it wouldn't be easy. The chamber was buried deep inside the core of the fortress, protected by dozens of armored soldiers, sentry drones, and energy walls. As they reached a side elevator, Jake leaned against the wall and pulled a thin wire from his belt. One chance to break in, he muttered. Yari nodded. Then we end this, Jake smirked, spoken like a true Deathworlder. The elevator hummed and descended. They passed. Dark rooms filled with sleeping machines. Lights flickered. Sparks flew from broken cables. The fortress was damaged, just enough to give them a chance. At the final floor, the doors slid open. Rows of enemy guards turned immediately. Jake tossed a flash grenade. The hallway lit up with white fire. Yari leaped into motion. Her blade moved like lightning, slicing through metal limbs. Jake shot from behind, hitting weak points, covering her back. Together, they cut through the defense line, but more came. Dozens more. We won't reach the chamber in time, Yari shouted. Jake tapped his earpiece. Now. From above, explosions rocked the fortress. The rebel ships had arrived. Fighter jets zoomed through the sky, hammering the fortress with plasma fire. One slammed into a docking bay, breaking it open. Then came the second wave: Trisari warriors, survivors, and even a few humans from scattered colonies, who had come to help. The resistance had united. Jake and Yari rushed forward. They entered the command chamber, an enormous circular room filled with red lights, floating control panels, and a massive hologram of the planet below. At its center stood the enemy commander, the same one Jake had fought before. This time, he had a large energy blade glowing in one hand. His armor had been upgraded. His eyes glowed brighter than ever. You've returned, he growled. Jake stood tall. Told you I don't stay dead. The commander looked at Yari, And you brought her, the noble girl who pretends to be a warrior. Yari raised her sword. I don't pretend. I am a warrior. And I'm ending you. The battle began. The commander charged. Jake blocked the first hit, the force slamming him back. Yari slipped behind the enemy, slicing upward, but the blade bounced off his armor. The commander spun, striking both of them with a powerful pulse wave. They crashed against the wall. Jake coughed, bleeding again. Yari tried to rise, but the commander stepped on her blade. Your world is weak, he said. It always was. That's why we take it. Jake crawled forward. Then take this. He tossed a small black cube onto the floor. It beeped. The lights in the chamber flickered. Control panels sparked. What did you do? The commander roared. Jake grinned. Killed the core. The device was a virus coated with stolen data. It overloaded the command system. Screens went black. The hologram flickered and died. Ships above the planet lost control. Drones fell from the sky. Across Tressa, the enemy force collapsed. The war was breaking. The commander howled in rage and lifted his blade, but Yari was already on her feet. With a cry, she jumped high and drove her sword into his exposed chest panel. The armor cracked. Sparks exploded. Jake fired one last shot into the weak point. The commander staggered. Back then fell. Hard. Silence filled the room. Only the distant sounds of explosions and crumbling. Metal echoed. Yari turned to Jake. It's over, she said. Jake leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Almost. Outside, the fortress began shaking. The command core was failing. Without it, the station would fall from the sky. Jake looked at her. You need to go. Yari shook her head. Not without you. We don't both have to die. She stepped closer. And we don't both have to live. We do this together. Jake gave a tired smile. I guess I'm not the only Deathworlder here anymore. The sky fortress trembled above Tressa. Metal groaned. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Fires roared in every corridor. The control core had collapsed. The entire fortress was dying and falling. Jake and Yari stood in the command chamber, bloodied. Exhausted but alive, the enemy commander lay defeated. The control panels were dark. The invasion was broken. Now came the final escape. Yari helped Jake toward the emergency launch bay. Come on, we have 60 seconds before this place hits the ground. Jake coughed and limped, one arm around her shoulders. What if there's no pod left? Then we fly on hope, she said without looking back. The hallways were filled with smoke. Explosions burst through the walls as power cells overloaded. Behind them, pieces of the fortress tore away. Falling toward the planet below. They reached the launch bay barely holding together. One emergency pod remained. Just one. Yari hit the door controls. Jake collapsed into the seat inside. You're not going to ask me if I'm okay? She gave a breathless laugh. You're never okay. You're human. The pod launched. Just in time. Behind them, the sky fortress cracked apart, its massive body tumbling, burning, and finally slamming into the ocean below. Tressa in a tower of fire and smoke. The war was over. 3 days later. The sky was blue. Yari stood in a green hill overlooking the floating ruins of her city. Around her, survivors worked to rebuild. Tressari engineers cleared rubble. Rebel humans helped restore power. Even Jake, still bandaged, was fixing a broken communication tower with a wrench and a loud curse. She smiled quietly. He noticed and waved. Hey, this thing's fighting me more than the commander did. Yari walked over, hands behind her. Back. Maybe you're just not using enough brains. Jake chuckled. Brains are overrated. Muscles work fine. She sat beside him in the grass. Together they watched as a group of human kids played with Trisari children near the water. Peace had returned, fragile but real. Yari looked at him. "You saved this planet," Jake shrugged. "You did too." "I had help." He looked into her eyes. "So did I." There was a pause. Then Yari asked softly, "What will you do now?" Jake leaned back, arms behind his head. "Don't know. I don't really belong anywhere. I was made for war." She tilted her head. "Maybe, but you chose peace." Jake didn't answer at first. Then he said, "You're the first person who's ever said that to me." She smiled. "Then maybe it's time you started choosing where you belong." He turned to her. "And if I choose here?" Yari didn't look away. "Then stay." A breeze rolled across the hilltop. He took her hand. "I guess this Deathworlder's finally found a home." She smirked. "Funny, so have I." They sat together. As the sun set over Tressa, above them, the stars began to shine again. But one star, a little brighter than the rest, marked the sky where the fortress had once floated. It would be a reminder that even in the darkest war, a Deathworlder and an alien girl could fight side by side. Not just to survive, but to win.